Season 2 of the Inspectations podcast, hosted by Justin Starbird, CEO of the Aebli Group. In business, as in life, one of the most difficult tasks a leader must do is find a way to manage expectations. Create expectations that are too high, and you will be constantly looked at as a failure. Create expectations that are too low, and your leadership will be questioned at every turn. Being able to inspect what you expect helps keep great teams pulling in the same direction and allows for pivots in real time. The Inspectations podcast brings together business leaders from all industries to talk about best practices, innovation, leadership, and business development. You're listening to the Inspectations podcast. Here's your host, Justin Starbird.
Welcome back to the Inspectations podcast. My name is Justin Starbird, and I get to welcome owner, founder of Sell Your Business for More, author, investor, entrepreneur, Eric Gilboord. Eric, great to have you on today.
Thank you, Justin. My pleasure.
It's always exciting to have somebody, like you to join the program, to talk about your experience in so many different endeavors. Especially, we're in a unique economic climate, and you must get, your phone ringing off the hook, no?
I'm getting a steady stream of sellers that are interested in doing something. Clearly, in the last week, it's gone higher than it was previously. But I'm also getting a huge number of buyers. There's lots of people with a lot of money out there who are looking to buy businesses. The challenge is they're looking to buy good businesses that are actually prepared for sale.
And those are actually fewer and far between, no?
Well, the truth of the matter is that 1 out of 5 companies will actually sell. I know it sounds crazy, but Those are the statistics. Only 20% will actually go to market and sell.
Wow. Why do you think that is? Is it because they're not prepared the way they thought they were and they've got to go back, or because
they're not prepared at all?
Yeah.
There's been no thought put into it. It's interesting. Somebody makes widgets for 30 or 40 years. That's all they think about is making widgets. They don't necessarily think about, what comes at the end of all this. And then all of a sudden they're faced with this scenario where they're 60 or 65 or 70 or 75 years old. There's no one to take over the business. They thought, I guess, a while ago that the family might, but that's pretty much a myth. That doesn't really happen. Yeah. And now they're faced with going down a path of something that they've never done before. I mean, almost all the sellers that we talk to are quote unquote first-time sellers.
Yeah.
Because they run their widget making business their whole lives, and they have no idea how to sell a business or prepare a business. And there's lots of other reasons. I mean, people have coasted for the last 10 years, so the business hasn't seen a lot of growth. There could be industry changes. Competitors could be nipping at their heels. Lots of reasons that can get in the way of a successful sale.
I often see statistics of, the number of people that are retiring or the number of businesses that are owned by folks of retirement age. And to your point, not having a long-term plan or any infrastructure in place that would transition ownership later. I have a whole outline of stuff planned for you, but then in my mind, I get all these questions. Why is that? I mean, I feel like often, especially if you're retirement age or a little bit, nearing that, your business is your biggest asset. Why don't people invest in it more to, actually treat it as such an asset, a business?
You know what? 65% of small and medium-sized business, which is basically 95% of companies, so that 65% are owned by boomer age business owners. And, in many cases, they've had a good life. They have a home paid for, they have a vacation property paid for, they have some other investments. Unfortunately, that's not all business owners. It's just sort of a small number of people who are quote unquote, pretty good business people that had maybe gotten along the way good wealth management advice.
Yeah.
And then you've got all the other people that, that basically run the company. They make widgets. They run the company as best they can. And they will tell you, proudly, and rightly so, that everything they know about running the business is what they picked up over the last number of years. And so, with so much on their mind, the final kind of selling the business, it's also not something that people look forward to. It's like if you've done something passionately for decades, the last thing on your mind is walking away from what you spent your life doing, what you love doing. Years ago, probably 10 years ago or more, there was a lot of talk about the quote unquote business tsunami, where all the boomer age business owners who were probably in their, late 50s or, early 60s, they were all going to sell their company. They were all going to go and golf for the rest of their lives or travel for the rest of their lives. And the reality is the people that made those predictions do not understand what a business owner's mindset is. That's not what they want to do. And so they've actually held out, and in many cases, as I said earlier, between, to 65, 70, 75 years old.
Yeah.
It's just not part of their DNA to walk away from something that they built. It's the cliche, the business is my baby. Well,
Right.
it actually is. The other side of it is, you have two families. You have a blood family, which is your typical family. Then you have a business family. And a
Yeah.
lot of people don't think about that. I've met and worked with owners for decades, and many of them are much closer to their business family. Many of them have employees that have been with them for 30 years, people who've grown up, with the owner.
Yeah.
Those are hard things to walk away from. I mean, it's basically like somebody saying, do you want to just walk away from your family?
Yeah.
Not a lot of people want to do that.
Well, especially if they've been at it for so long. Question two is another statistic that you see is that, the retirement age right now and the folks that are, in that spot in life actually hold, most of the money in the US, like a lot of assets. And a lot of that, to your point earlier, is also cash that could be realized as a result of profits, or they've had good, wealth management advice, et cetera. Are there folks there to buy these businesses if that tsunami ever, takes place?
Well, the tsunami is actually starting because natural aging has now injected itself into the whole formula. So when you're 70 or 75 years old, it's time. I mean, you're either nature tells you it's time, or something happens to you, or a spouse gets ill, or there's lots of reasons. And, that whole scenario is happening. There are, billions, if not trillions of dollars out there. We get calls all the time from buyers who are looking for good businesses. And then, in fact, some buyers maybe are looking for struggling businesses because that's their niche and they know what to do with it. But for the most part, they're looking for well-run companies. And, they have the money, they're ready, willing, and able. You also have a phenomenon where we have sellers who've worked with us. They've sold their business. They're sitting on $10 million. They've gone and golfed and traveled and sat around the house for 6 months or a year. They've somehow managed to put together a home office in the basement. And eventually the spouse says to them, okay, it's been a year since you sold the company. When are you going to get out of the house?
Yeah. What are you going to go do? Right. What are you going to go do?
And so what the owners have decided to do, and this is interesting because it connects with what we talked about a few minutes ago, they've decided that the best way for them to feel comfortable about their investment, about this fund of money that that they've come into, is to go and buy a bunch of smaller companies. So what they're doing is they're taking the $10 million, they're buying three, $2 million companies. They're not working at them every day, they're overseeing, but it's an area of wealth management, wealth growing that they understand, which is basically businesses. It keeps them interested. It keeps them active. They're involved. And to the owners that I've, been dealing with, they're much more comfortable with a portfolio of businesses as the bulk of their investment versus the stock market or, or other funds where they have no control over over what happens.
Right.
So you have this whole phenomenon of, what have now become serial entrepreneurs who've sold their company and now they own two, three, four other companies, or they get together with a few buddies who are in the same position and they have a portfolio of a half a dozen companies. And so, that could be worth $20 million. It could be worth, who
Well,
knows, $50
yeah.
million.
Well,
And
and
then
there's
what?
no cap to it, right? I mean, unlike some of the stock market stuff or other investments, like, if you know that area and you can grow it, there's no limit there.
And if you can do it at your leisure, you don't necessarily have to be working all the time. I mean, it's the perfect world. It's that scenario of work hard, play hard, on your own terms. I get buyers that call me and say, we're looking to buy some companies, but don't come to me with anything under $50 million. So when you talk about, is there money out there?
Yeah.
I also, I also have buyers that have come to me and said, don't talk to me about anything under $100 million. Now,
Yeah.
that's a little mind boggling for the average person. But honestly, when you're sitting on $1 billion and you have to deploy those funds to something,
Something, right?
those same people are buying, $500 million companies. And it's the same scenario as the guy who's buying five $1 million companies. It's the toughest job in the world. It's a huge amount of responsibility, but you'd be amazed at how many people are in that position,
Yeah.
or people who came into an inheritance. I mean, clearly we're in a scenario where, the boomer age is, if they haven't created it themselves, they've come into an inheritance. Typically they don't necessarily know what to do with the money. And people are moving again in that direction of, joining a group that buys companies. So the lead will spend $5 million dollars in this little private equity fund, and the other guys will put in $1 million each, and
Yeah.
they'll buy some companies. So it seems to be there's a lot of opportunity if you're willing to sell, and a lot of opportunity for buyers who are looking to buy.
Eric, how did you get into this? Not everybody starts out in their career and says, you know what, I want to help others, sell their business. It usually comes from, long nights and a lot of heartache or challenges yourself, overcoming obstacles to create success. Talk a little bit about how you got into this.
All of the above.
Yeah.
I started in the ad agency business.
Okay.
So in Canada, in Toronto, and I worked for some regional agencies and some large international agencies with a whole bunch of well-known clients. I did that for a couple of decades. And then in 94, I started my own company called Soho Marketing. And it dealt with small business and originally small office, home office, but it had quickly evolved into, the higher end of small business, medium-sized companies, that type of thing.
Sure.
And I did that for a good period of time, a couple of decades. And it got to a point where I was working with owners who at the time were probably, 50, 55 years old. They're the audience, the sellers that I've talked about, but this was a little while ago. And it got to the point where, in the early, I guess the late 2010s or so, what I discovered was I would ask them, hey, are you thinking about selling your business? And the response typically was, how did you know? Well, you're of a certain age. The company's in the state where it is right now. You're likely looking at some life changes, coming along. Have you put much thought into it? And at that point, yeah, people were starting to think about it. And, some smart people got out and took their money and did the things that we've talked about. But, like most things, those folks were kind of on the leading edge of, doing things. I started to speak more with the owners about getting ready to sell,
Sure.
more about the concept of selling. And then, a few years ago, I decided that, well, maybe I should get into the business of selling companies. And so I spent a lot of time learning an awful lot, and sure, trial and error and everything else. And have sold a number of companies, and
You sold a
it,
number of your own companies, right?
No, I sold other people's
Yeah.
companies, and what I discovered was that while it's complicated, it's also easy. It's or at least simple in terms of the whole world of selling a business. When you get into due diligence and all the detail, there's nothing simple about that. But the idea of bringing a really good buyer together with a really good seller, which is essentially, what I do. I have other folks on my team that do a lot of the detail work, but my main job is connecting the dots. So
Hmm.
finding buyers and finding good sellers and bringing them together. And, the way you do that is essentially from marketing. And
Yeah.
because I have a solid marketing background, I understand how to find buyers, I understand how to find sellers, and I understand how to bring them together and put them in a room. So the outcome is that we actually facilitate selling someone's company.
Sure. How do you overcome that 20% is, or the 80% that don't sell? When you're dealing with your clients, I've got to imagine that you've done a lot of prep work with them each to make sure that that percentage goes up.
It's interesting. I've evolved over several years and learned, the hard way. There are some companies that are not meant to be up for sale, or owners that are not in the right um, mindset to do what's necessary to sell the business. So we're very picky about who we take on. We don't take on, that many people. I like to think that I wouldn't take on anyone to sell their business unless it's a business that I would buy myself. Regardless of what the industry is and regardless of all those other details and how much the company is, if I could, would I? Would
Yeah.
I be interested? Do I? So I look at that seller's company through the lens of a buyer before I agree to take anyone on.
Sure. Eric, let's talk a little bit about that criteria then. I mean, to say that, if you wouldn't take them on as a client unless you would buy them, what does that mean? How do you define that? What are some of the criteria that you look for?
Okay, there's a variety of things, but let's start with the right management team. Management team can be 3 people or it can be 13 people, but if you don't have the right people in place, if you don't have, what you don't want is somebody where everybody in the management team is about to retire. That's
Right.
not a good thing. You want a company that's profitable. You want a company that has, from what I understand, one of the most important things is really great customer service. In some polls that I've done on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
I've discovered that it's a huge thing. It's like 75% of people that are acquiring companies are looking for businesses with really good customer service, which isn't that difficult. You want an owner who's ready, willing, and able to leave. Not everybody wants to leave. You have some situations where you have the runaway bride, where the owner gets to the altar and decides that they don't want to leave. I've had that happen
Yeah.
with a $35 million company. 1 week before the deal was to be signed, changed his mind.
Wow.
Yeah, unbelievable. There were other reasons that that are involved in that decision.
Sure.
But I mean, talk about blowing your mind. I mean, that's unbelievable. I find that when I walk around a business, whether typically in a manufacturing organization, when you walk around, because that's kind of the first thing the owner does is they chat with you for a while, then they let me show you around my business. You can see how an owner interacts with the staff. You can see whether the staff are friendly and comfortable with the owner or not. And that makes a big difference. I walked around one company where I swear it looked like the staff were hostages. I mean, they were scared to death when they saw the owner come into the room. That's a pretty unique scenario, but it does happen. For the most part, what I find is the kind of people that we deal with. Um, again, they're family, so they tend to take care of their business family. But it's always a good sign because if people are uncomfortable, typically the business is not going to run that well.
Right.
Are they innovative? Are they changing? Are they up to date? Are they bringing out new products? Are they improving their IT? Are they improving, the equipment that they have? Are they marketing? That's a key one. You wouldn't believe how many successful.
I didn't pay you to say that. We'll just say that. As somebody that owns an agency, it's often one of the first things that we talk to our clients about too is how are you telling your story?
Yeah, and what happens is they're running on, what they've been doing for 20 years or 30 years, and you can look at marketing materials and you can see how old they are. You can see who created them, whether they were in house or a printer created them. Not good things. You can look at a sales group, and I will tell you now. You probably know this already. Most owners don't realize it, and they're kind of dumbfounded when I tell them. But if you have 10 salespeople, guarantee you two of the salespeople do 80% of the business.
Yeah.
And the owners kind of look at you and go, "How did you know?" Because it's a standard operating procedure. So if this company we're looking at has 10 salespeople and two of them are doing 80% of the business, what are you paying for the other eight? Now maybe they need some training, maybe they need some help, maybe there are other reasons to have them on board, but not all eight of them. So, I'm working with someone now. It's a smaller IT company, 10 employees in total, and I strongly recommended that he not get rid of, that he let three of them go, which he's done. Again, small company, small business, literally put 200 grand in his jeans because he's not spending on those three salaries.
Yeah.
I mean, doing the same work,
Yeah.
but put a couple $100,000 in his pocket. But the more important thing is that when a buyer comes along to look at the business, oh, okay, so you have the right amount of staff, you're making money. I'm interested in this business. Prior to that decision, you had too many staff, because in the IT world, you should be making doing X amount of business per employee, but 150 grand per employee. So he was way out of whack there. Yeah. And that's what, sophisticated buyers will do. Anybody who's bought a business before typically will look at the books, look at the company, have an hour conversation with the owner, and a real professional buyer will know where things are in an hour. And if you think as a seller that you can fool them, no, that's not going to happen. Yeah. Because if you can fool them, then they probably can't write the check.
Yeah. So, thinking about, the criteria, so to speak, that you're looking for, Eric, well, think about what are some of the things that bring most value. So you talk about, making sure you have the right staff, that you're paying them the right amounts, that they're doing the right amount of work, so to speak. But what are some of the things that help a company, either sell for more, or that you can actually find value in if you're on the buying side, that folks are looking for as well?
If it's smooth, if the transition can be smooth, if you can buy a company that's already running without the owner's participation, the owner does not have to be there, then as an investor or a buyer, you can take that company and you can first of all predict profitability over the next few years pretty easily, but you can comfortably take over a business and know that it's a pretty solid investment. And then your job, if you want, is to help increase the value by growing the business. But if it's stable and running and there's perhaps a CEO or a COO in place who's running the business, that's a great sign. I mean, that's a terrific sign that it's working on its own.
Yeah. When you think about, how to help the businesses get more for their assets, of course you have the physical assets and you have the, if it's manufacturing, they have the machines in the building, or they have the building, or they have the land, or they have the trucks and the transportation available to them. But what are some hidden assets that owners don't realize that they're sitting on that help drive value?
IP. I mean, I've had more than a few occasions where I've said, so how do you do that? Whatever that is. Oh, well, we had a program created to do X. Oh, have you patented it? Or a new machine that they jerry rigged a machine to do a certain thing that you can't get done anywhere else. Have you patented that? Well, no. Oh, well, you might want to think about that because there could be a huge amount of value. Typically, it's in the IP area where
Yeah.
it's just not, again, it's not something that they're knowledgeable about, not something that they think about. It's that over the 40 years, we needed to be able to make our machine do this. So we figured out how to make it do this. We thought a part, we made a part, what have you. And now we're the only people who can make it do, X.
Yeah.
Well, that has some real value to it.
Yeah.
Long-term relationships with customers, obviously, are key.
Yeah. We find when we come into a client, not often are they always looking to sell, but when we're thinking about it from the agency perspective, often, as I mentioned offline, we work with the executive team or we work with members of leadership to help because we tend to come in, and it's just our experience. We tend to come in when somebody in leadership, you mentioned the sales folks, that you have 10 sales people and two of them are doing 80% of the work. We come in sometimes and it's the leader, the CEO is the rainmaker, and they're creating 80% of the business. See, they've got sales guys and maybe that's who ends up closing the deal or something because the owner, gave it to them. But what we find is that often companies that are looking to sell in the next 5 years don't have systems in place to help generate leads or create a pipeline that makes for a predictable, profitable business. Is that something that you help companies with?
From an advisory capacity, I don't do any of that work, nor does my company. But from an advisory capacity, I would recommend they do exactly what you're talking about. And as a very, very simple example, saying to an owner, do you think all your customers know everything that you do?
Right.
Well, what do you mean? Well, you do these 20 things. Everybody's buying one or two or three. Do you think they know about the other 17? Well, of course they do. But why don't you get on the phone and ask some of them? And, the reality is no, your customers don't know. So here's a simple thing. And this is a form of lead generation, as you're talking about, not overly sophisticated, but easily executable. Let's put together a one pager. You should put together a one pager that says, "Did you know we do all these things?" and send it out to all your current and lapsed customers. That's it. That's the assignment. And if you're really gung ho, then actually call them and
Yeah.
say, "Did they receive it?" And I will guarantee you business. Now that IT company that I was talking about, that's doing around, I don't know, under 1 million, and it's not a normal size company that we typically deal with, but there are other reasons why I took it on. He picked up a $200,000 project. That's significant,
Yeah.
change just in
Yeah.
doing that. So yeah, I'm a big believer in marketing, obviously, and that's where most people, they'll rely on a rainmaker, as you said. And the challenge with the rainmaker is, okay, so now the rainmaker gets hit by a bus. The rainmaker sells the business. The rainmaker is now gone. Has he transitioned all his important clients and his how to get those types of clients knowledge to a shadow? Has he transitioned that? And that doesn't happen overnight. I mean, as you know, that's going to happen over a period of time. So fundamentally, if I'm looking at two businesses that are the same, and in one case, the rainmaker has a shadow and somebody who's able to pick up and move on and grow versus, oops, the business is in trouble because the rainmaker is leaving. Well, there's a fundamental difference in who I'm going to consider taking on as a client, as a seller, and who somebody's going to want to buy.
Yeah. Eric, talk a little bit about your business. You have a couple, one that is more of a consultancy and then one that, helps companies, do a lot of these things on their own. What are some of the differences? How can people, work with you?
Sure. Warren BDC, Warren Business Development Center, is the company that actually sells other people's companies. That's our main business. During the course of running that, I've come across a lot of experiences, expertise, if you will, and rather than trying to teach one owner at a time, I've written some books and I created a online system called Sell Your Business for More. And basically what that does, it's a 4-part or 4-module online system that is a series of lessons and tasks, if you will. And, it starts off with learning about kind of the background of what's happening in the world of business selling. It speaks to boomer age business owners, although it's good obviously for anyone.
Yeah.
Next one is really based on the seller and what does the seller have to do personally, professionally. It deals with a number of issues that a seller has to take into consideration and take action on before they go to sell their business. The third section is basically about the company. What do you have to do for the company to make it more desirable, by the right kind of buyer? And then the fourth section is really about the whole process of actually selling the business and due diligence and LOIs and all that kind of thing.
Sure.
So, I don't recommend that people try and sell their business themselves. And the reason I say that is, ever try to sell your house by yourself?
Right.
It doesn't work for a variety of reasons. So trying to sell your business by yourself, 1,000 times more difficult than selling a house. So what this online system does is it effectively gives you a really solid understanding. It's a learning process in terms of what you need to know and what you will need to do in order to sell your business successfully. One of the lessons is how to find the right intermediary. I mean, the person who's going to represent you to the marketplace and facilitate a sale. So, we're encouraging people to learn what to do so that they're equipped to make better decisions as they move along. The other benefits of it are that you will increase the value of the business while you're going through this process. And the other interesting thing is that many of the things that you will have to do once you're actually in that state and in that process of selling the business, like due diligence and all that, it's already something that you will be dealing with. So when the requirement comes along, you will already be several steps ahead. And that helps to relieve stress and to make the whole process a much more enjoyable, profitable, successful way of selling your business. So knowledge is power. And that's essentially what it is. It's knowledge, a great deal of knowledge cut up into a whole bunch of little tasks. And every lesson is available in text form, so it's a PDF, and audio. So if you're inclined, you could sit and listen to me, talk to you about that lesson, or you can read the lesson, or you can do both. And typically they have a little bit of a task after that, things that you'll need to do. And the other thing is that it's a team sport. You'll want to get your staff involved. And no, you don't tell your staff at the beginning that you're selling the company. What you effectively say is you're growing the value of the business. And that's an honest, fair, thing to say, because that is in fact what you're doing. Slowly at the right time, you will bring the right people into the loop and let them know that your plan is to sell the business. But I can tell you now, if you're 75 years old and you've been running the widget making company for 45 years, everybody knows you're going to sell the business.
Yeah.
Because it's just common sense. And in fact, once you do tell them, they're going to say to you, "Oh, we thought you'd never do it."
Right. Well, I mean, for some, it's almost a relief, right? Because it's their livelihood. It's, there's some uncertainty there. And we see that too, especially when we're dealing with some, older folks in leadership. Their priorities change, and all of us do. All of our priorities change. I mean, mine have adjusted since I started, 12, 14 years ago, and yours have too. I mean, it's part of the way life is, right?
Well, I've found situations, real world situations, where somebody had to delay engaging with us for 6 months. Why? Because a spouse got ill. It is what it is.
Yeah.
That's how life, or a parent. You're dealing with somebody who's 65 years old and their parent is now, God forbid, suffering from Alzheimer's or what have you. And I've had people take off for a year because they had to deal with personal issues.
Yeah.
And all you can do is support them. And so that's real world. That's where, nature comes into it and tells you that it's time to slow down, or it's time to stop, or it's time to, to move on. Even though you may or may not want to, life comes and just, there's a famous, Mike Tyson line that I like. It's, God, what is it? The line is, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face.
That's right.
It's a great line,
Was
but
that
it's true.
right before Buster Douglas? I don't remember if that was it was one of his earlier fights. I do enjoy that quote as well, and agree with it. Often you have best laid plans or thoughts or ideas, and then often you do get punched in the face with life or situations that you can't control. And I always say, with our clients and folks that we work with, is to, even if you're not thinking about selling today, it's best practices to do some of these things so that if something does happen, there is a chain of command, or there is an opportunity for, there to create value, because you don't want to, be doing it all at the end, right? Rushing because something happened, because there was some event, because there was, an issue and you need to sell for some reason. You don't want to be hastily going through all these multitude of steps in order to make that happen.
You know what the scariest thought is that I like to share with owners? Hey, you've got a partner, call it a 60-40 partner. How would you like it if your wife and your partner ran the business? Well, what do you mean? What would happen if something happened to you?
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, Nancy and Jack, who hate each other, by the way, are now running the business. Or, forget Jack, and let's just say Nancy is the widow. Something happened to you, and now all of a sudden she's responsible for the business. She doesn't know anything about running it. So what happens is the buyers, the sharks come out, they smell blood in the water, and now, Nancy, who you thought was going to have a $2 million retirement fund, has an $800,000 retirement fund because you didn't prepare for it. I mean, it's tough love. I get that, but I've seen it happen. I've watched, I know of a situation where someone made some bad decisions near the end, and lost his house, lost his vacation property, lost everything basically.
Yeah. I mean, you hear those stories often. It's just, and especially if that's your asset, right? So, I really appreciate you coming on today to talk. Where can people find you?
They can find me at warrenbdc.com. So WARRENBDC.com, and Eric Gilboard, EricGilboord.com.
Great. Well, Eric, you've certainly given us a lot to think about, especially as we are, just getting a wee bit into 2025 in January now, and new president's taking office, and folks are thinking about these things often. It's really great to highlight your areas of expertise, and certainly thank you for sharing all the value that you've acquired over the years with our listeners. This has been awesome.
I can tell you it's going to be like the Wild West for the next few years. People are going to be buying and selling, and things are going to be happening, and interest rates are going to come down. Everything's going to explode. So it's a great time to buy. It's a great time to sell. The opportunities are being put in front of you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Hopefully we have you on again, and we'll talk again about this some more.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to being with you again. Thank you.
Great. On behalf of my guest today, Eric Gilboord, owner, founder of Sell Your Business for More, author, entrepreneur, investor, you've been listening to the latest episode of the Inspectations podcast.